Yo,
Yo,
what's up?
so we are back again, and
Yep,
our
yep.
guest is Dr. Shawn Schwaner, PhD. What's up? And we
Hey,
have
what's going
Rebirth of
on?
the Word. We're hosting, and I am Fat Jesus Live, and we are talking about this amazing book, The Rogue Street Awakening, which it is within the social science area and self-help like. But it's more than that. It is much, much more than that. It is an awakening. It's a book that will tremendously change your life. It is to shake you and say, wake up, because this right here will like flip you over and say, look, you thought your life or the life that you're living is actually this way, the way life is supposed to be, but it's not. It's not this way. And this man, this doctor is here to tell you that it's not this way. And life isn't like this. And in this book, it will tell you exactly how life is supposed to be. Dr. Schreiner, tell us what this book is about.
Oh, wow. The Rogue Street Awakening. It really is. It's truly about awakening, but it's not about, I started looking from the perspective of self-help. And then as I got going into it, I realized, and I hate to say this because there's self-help people out there, but I found self-help to be so much like so many other things, very fraudulent. And I started to find that all the hoopla and all the excitement and all the 1 day, 2 day, 3 day events are exciting when you're there, and they can pump you up and motivate you to make a change. And then you go home and everything stays the same, and you haven't ingratiated yourself with your inner being, with your what I call in the book authentic self, but I really call it the you, right? Mm-hmm. And I went through the process. I said, you know what, I'm a self-help guy. And then I realized self-help's a lot more complicated, right? It's a lot more complicated because if you don't start to address who the person is first, how are you going to help anything? You can't help others. You can't help yourself. You certainly can't help your community. So it's a book about process. And for me personally, it was a book about becoming, right? And it was, I'm sure we're going to talk about, for me personally, it was a revolution. It was a revolution. And it redefined so many of the parts of my life that never made sense to me in the past. And now they do make sense, and I've become an entirely different person, right? And everything has fallen into place. So self-help comes from the inner awakening, but it's not just a religious awakening. It's an interconnected awakening between many moving parts, if that makes any sense.
Incredible. And it's incredible that you talked about the billionaires and the inmates are the exact same structure phenomenons and the rig curve and explode. I mean, what is that all about? Okay,
so you're referring to the bell-shaped curve. I've written so many books in the last year. Some of them, I'm not gonna lie, I've had help with ChatGPT because I can't keep up with myself. And I've had others that have been autobiographical.
I gotta say this before you continue, bro. Listen, as an author, ChatGPT, Grok, and all those, and Grammarly, because I use Grammarly, all that stuff helps you just as much as if you sent your book or your information to an editor. It just skips the middleman. Same exact thing. It literally, I've heard people say all the time, any author that uses AI to help them write their book, they're not a real author. I always say, well, tell me an author who hasn't never used an editor, and then we can have that discussion. So I just want to say, let's go.
Let me address that for a second. So I'm one guy with so many ideas. There's no way I can keep up with my own ideas. And I was reading John Maxwell's book. I can't remember which one it was, The Greatness in You or something like that. And I read the acknowledgments. And the acknowledgments were about 4 or 5 pages long about all these people that helped him write that book. And as I read the book, every chapter was exactly the same. It starts with a quote, then you get 2 paragraphs, another quote, it closes, new section. And that page is about 4 pages long, 5 pages long, exact same structure. And what he said is, is he tells people to go find evidence and stories pertaining to the quotation. They put it together, and all he does is make sure it's coherent and edited. And I said, wait a minute. So Stephen King doesn't write his own books. John Maxwell does not write his own books. So all these celebrities that people, I'm not going to say worship, that's the wrong word, look up to for the words that they share, don't even write their own words. They just edit it. And then I look at the fact I'm just one person without a whole entire corporation behind me. And I have to use what resources I have access to. And that's where the problem is that, I use the idea of the iron cage all the time, right? Which is a Max Weber type of term. Essentially what the iron cage is that we get locked in several institutional systems. 1, economic systems, obviously. 2, psychological systems. 3, bureaucracy, and all these things tied to the media. So what ends up happening is as we age further into our lives, we lose track of who we are, and we become locked into the ideals that come to us from external sources. And then we assess ourselves based upon standards that are impossible to uphold. And then when we don't do something original, or we don't do something that is quote unquote authentic, it is derogated, somehow less valuable, when the fact is that when I look at all these billionaires in particular, none of them made it by themselves. None of them made it by themselves. A self-made quote unquote man didn't make it by himself. As a matter of fact, Steve Jobs, he didn't make one piece of technology. He just walked into Apple and said, here's what I want. I have 5,000 people, make it happen. Right.
That's right.
I get penalized if I use a resource that's available. Now, this ties back to Fat Jesus. This ties right back to your whole question about the bell-shaped curve, right? If we look at the bell-shaped curve, first of all, I was reading the other day that our students are increasingly less capable of handling reading and mathematics, right? And I saw a study that says that the average entering college student, like 20% of college students, read at a 10-year-old level and do math at a 10-year-old level. And I realized
I remember that.
Okay, you're gonna love this, Fat Jesus.
I was one of his students.
So you're gonna love the fact that I came to the belief that our fear of math becomes the prison of our mind, right? Because once we hate math, how are you going to invest in markets? How are you going to take care of your budget? How are you going to learn how to calculate and hear the sounds that vibrate through your ear? Because sound is nothing more than a physics equation. That's all it is, a sound wave, right? But what we do is we systematically get entire populations to dislike math, which means as soon as you dislike math, or as soon as you can't read, you can no longer fully participate in the game. And that's where the prison is, right? So going back to the bell-shaped curve, right? What that indicates is that with the curve, there's standard deviations 1 and 2, right? If you are in the top 2 standard deviations, that means you're in the top 5% of whatever it is, whether it's income, whether it's wealth, whether it's IQ, it doesn't matter. There's 5% that accounts for a great deal of the variation. But on the other side of the 5%, right, are those persons who have lower IQs, those persons who have lumpen proletariats, to use Karl Marx's term, those persons that we have to have the 5% social dynamite and the social junk, so that as long as there's social dynamite and junk, it holds down the wage structure. So therefore, you always have to have 5% that are completely displaced. Right now, here's what happens is that in this curve, the top 5% become whom? They become the owners of the assets. The bottom 5%, we see a higher return into going to prison, right? So if we take a look at the extremes, the ones who are on the left side of the curve are more likely to go to prison, even though we know Epstein and his boys should be in prison too, but they're protected because they're on the top 5%. And as a matter of fact, we know they're in the top 1/10 of 1%. But that's how that distribution works, right? So the most of us are right there in the middle somewhere, right? Trying to get through our daily basis, trying to get through our daily lives. And what happens is that we forget that there's a distribution of everything, right? In terms of outcomes, life outcomes. Now, here's the issue. The issue is that if there's an average income, let's just say $65,000 a year, right? And I think it's 85 for dual family income or what have you. It doesn't matter. So let's say it's 65,000. Well, that's the meaning. That's the median. Over here to the right are the top 1%, who only earn like $1 million or more. I mean, that's a lot. Don't get me wrong, but it's not hundreds of millions. The top 1% makes about a little bit over $1 million. If you're in the top 5% makes about 250,000, et cetera. But I'm not here to talk about income as much as to say, how can we shift that average median income from 65 to 85? Now watch this, Fat Jesus. You're going to like this.
Okay.
Here's how this works. Once we hate math, we can't see the mathematics behind the movement. So instead, what we are fed on a daily basis are these battles between Generation X and the Generation Z, between those from other countries, those from here, those who are wealthy, those who are not wealthy. In other words, we start to see over and over again that there's all these divisions. And now what we're seeing is this inundation of AI taking over the labor force, everybody being displaced, that we're heading into dystopia. Now watch this. The more we believe that we're in a dystopian period, the more controllable we are based upon the control of our emotions through fear. If we can't do the math, then we can't break the cage. If we can't write our name, we're already set behind. And so when I take a look at what these battles are, and I hear all these people, I looked at the numbers, by the way. I went and looked up the numbers. Unemployment rate's lower now than it was in the 1980s. White collar jobs, 75% of the population are white collar jobs, right? Versus I think it was like 65% in the 1980s. Now watch this. This is what's important. 10% were self-employed in 1985. 10% are self-employed now. So here's what we're seeing. The news, the media, and the social media tells us everything is breaking apart. But what's really happening is, and Rebirth, you know this because you're historically oriented. Here's what we really know, is that we are in what is called an Engels pause, ENGELS. And when you have a massive change in society, whether you go from religious to scientific, people don't know what the new rules are, which is the first industrial revolution, the Enlightenment. When you go from an agricultural society, like America in the 1800s, to an industrial society, and you got to move to the cities, you don't know what the new rules are. When we went from typewriters to computers, it changed the rules. When the internet came into place, it changed the rules. Now we have this technology, AI, that's changing all the rules in a way that we didn't see. And unfortunately, because we haven't been equipped with critical thinking skills, we believe that it's the end of humanity. When I believe that what it is a period where we're going to have a 20-year pause to try to figure out what is going on. And that pause is where culture has to adapt, change the new forms of socialization, change the new cultural belief systems, et cetera, to make sense of the change that has taken place. And the bell-shaped curve, those who most quickly adapt to the change in terms of income, wealth, all that stuff, are going to be the ones on closing on the top 5%. Those who do not are going to be on the bottom 5%. And what's going to happen is access and embracing that change is going to be the new social division line in terms of class, race, gender, ethnicity, sexual preference, etc., education level. That's where we're heading. And I think, and you're going to like this, Fat Jesus, I know you're going to like this, it's by design.
Wow.
It's by design. It's by design by the 6 corporations that control 90% of all information that comes through the media.
I've been saying that.
Yeah, no, it's a fact. Then you take a look at who controls the major Fortune 500 companies, the same groups that control the media institution, the same one. I mean, take a look at look at the bell-shaped curve again. If we take a look at all the elected officials in the Senate and Congress and the presidency, right? Or we take a look at the billionaires. Let's just take a look at the billionaires. 35% of the billionaires came from Ivy League schools.
Yeah.
I did the research. I know this for a fact. Same thing with the billionaires. What is it? And don't tell me that, Jeffrey Bezos dropped out, Zuckerberg dropped out. Forget that. You don't get an education for knowledge. You get the education for the linkages. And when they hit the ground,
who you know, not what you know, right?
Thank you. And if you
that's exactly what I was going to say, bro. That's exactly what I was going to say. It's not about what you know. It's always been about who you know, because you can know everything in the world, but nobody's going to care about that, because if you don't have this person backing you up, that doesn't matter. That's why it's important for me to stick to sharing what I've read personally, not my opinion, not what I think, what ifs, none of that. I don't have the educational background because I don't have a college degree. All I do is just read. I went into the military, been to combat 4 different times, got out, and then I was like, yo, I love history. I love information. I love this, that, and the third. And I said, I'm just going to read. And I read so much, and all I do is just share what I've read. And actually, people get more mad at me sharing something they didn't know. They're not mad that they didn't have this, that the information is incorrect or not. They're mad that they didn't know this and they couldn't say it first. And in this whole world of social media and all this, everybody wants to be the person to be like, I told you so. Well, what are you telling somebody? Because somebody thought this idea before you did. I mean, we have literally books from 200-300 years ago, thousands of years ago, of ancient texts that had these same ideas that people are speaking about in 2026. The only difference is the science back then is not the same science that we have today, and science is able to back up a lot of what was said in the past.
Well, Fat Jesus, he had a tech. No, did he have a textbook? I don't like textbooks. Because
I was for all the digital books because I didn't want to carry any textbooks.
Hey, don't tell anybody, but I quit using textbooks. I said, I'm your textbook. Yeah, I'm going to tell you what to look up.
I saw the future. I was like, we're gonna all have tablets.
Hey, that's. I'm glad he said that, because I didn't buy a hard copy of your book. I sure did get it on Kindle. As soon as
me too. I bought. I have it right here. I bought your book. See? I have your book, and I have your digital. I have your Kindle as well.
When
it was on sale.
Thank you.
Digital was on sale.
Yeah, when Fat Jesus had actually said, when he said that you was an author and that you wrote books, like I said, I go straight to Amazon or whatever source that I can to get books from, and I look for the book and I download. I'm telling you, I'm going to read the book, and I'm definitely going to ask you for another conversation, because
I'm going.
Like I said, I think that most of our knowledge that we have today doesn't come from people from academia. Most of our knowledge comes from people reading these books from academia and saying, "Yo, you didn't know this? Read this or look at this or something." You know what I mean?
Well, I bought the book because his signatures can be worth a lot of money later on. So.
Well, okay. All right, thank you. Maybe.
No, but I really wanted to back up a little bit, because I want to talk about your other books, Doc. And I know you want to talk about your book right now, but Doc, you write about sending 8 feet away from a jagged brick wall, hurling a hard rubber ball against it, and being forced by Mama Green to field 100 in a row without a single error. If you messed up at 97, you went back to 0. How did that brutal neighborhood drill prepare your nervous system to survive the bad bounces of your adult life when everything collapsed?
Wow, that's a whole book in and of itself. Let me say
his first book now, everybody. His first
Dear
book.
Mama. That was Dear Mama. I actually took it off the market because I thought it was so dark. I was offered a movie deal.
And I have that book. And that was his first book. And it's deep. It runs deep into his heart, and it ran deep within our whole community. It really speaks volumes. And it runs through all his other books too.
People loved the book, but it was so violent. I just wanted to peel back from the violence. And what Rogue Street Awakening did is it helped me make sense of the violence, which I'll talk about that later. But 100 bouncing balls, that's one of the best stories that there is. And it's such a simple story, but it's so complex, right? Because I'm pretty smart, but I never saw myself as smart enough to have a PhD and all these master's degrees I have. But what I had that a lot of people around me didn't have was the ability to sit down for 8 to 12 hours and work until I understood the meaning of one word, right? And so at the beginning, I'm talking about, I can write about I write about 40 pages a day. Then I use ChatGPT to write another 60. So I usually pop out about 100 pages a day, 60 of my own, 40 of my own, 60 of ChatGPT. Then I've developed an investing protocol. I have a school that I'm starting. I have the Life Coaching Center, full-time professor, full-time restaurant manager. I'm also a part-time professor. And people say, how? I said, because I threw 100 balls against the wall. They said, what do you mean? I said, well, listen. I said, when I was a little boy, I wanted to play professional baseball for the Reds, right? And the reason was the Reds is not because I was from Toledo, Ohio, but it's because Joe Morgan was 5'8", and he was the shortest player in professional baseball. And I was a runt. I was the smallest kid in the whole neighborhood. And Mama Green, let me talk about her for just 1 second.
Go ahead. Nobody knows. Our listeners don't know anything about Mama Green. And that's what's important about this new book that you wrote. People don't know about Mama Green.
No. Mama Green was probably the most colorful human being I've ever met. She was, well, I wouldn't be on the planet if it wasn't for her, because my mother was not going to keep me when she was pregnant. Mm-hmm. And Mama Green was an African-American woman who had hands the size of Julius Erving, monster hands. And she was a sharecropper from Arkansas. She dropped out of school in the 3rd grade to chop down trees because the timber from the trees was used to rebuild Chicago after the Great Chicago Fire. She was a professional bare knuckle boxer. She made money by playing piano by ear. And then she became a master cook, right? Wow. And so Mama Green told my mother, hey, I'll raise your son as my own, and you don't have to pay me anything. And then there's Daddy Green and her son Leo, who I called Guy, and their daughter named Irma Jean, who is one of the 3 queens. My mother, Irma Jean, and Mama Green were the 3 women that raised me, and I call them the 3 queens. Now, they were rough now, don't get me wrong. The only reason I'm on this planet is because a chicken flew in through a window in Arkansas while Mama Green was baking a pie. And she threw the chicken out the window and broke his leg. And her stepfather came home and pulled a switchblade on her and threatened to kill her in the kitchen. Make a long story short, she shot him 3 times, and the guy who gave her the gun, they drove away. Had she been executed in that kitchen that day, I wouldn't be here, right? Wow. So I look at this from a lineage perspective and from a historical perspective that, and it's something that I've really had to grapple with, is that I'm very anti-violence, but I also understand that violence precariously was the key to me even having life in the first place, which is something that I've always had to go through and figure out. So Mama Green, she played her first husband played for the Negro Leagues. He played for Memphis, and he played against Satchel Paige, and I allegedly hit a home run off of Satchel Paige, who evidently was the greatest pitcher of all time. And Mama Green played in the
what a history
women's. Yeah, well, she was there when Elaine got burned down.
Why not write a book about that? Gee whiz, bro.
It's in there. It's in there.
No, I mean like a specific book about that. That's incredible. Where did they write this stuff?
She was an eyewitness.
Crap, dude, that's amazing.
Yeah, she watched all 300 and some people get executed, and then she told me she used that. She always taught me about
it. Part of history.
That's how I became a sociologist. So,
thank God you're alive today to write about that, because that's part of history. And historians get to study that book, and they can continue the lineage of what she experienced, and her memory continues on. That is freaking amazing. How dare you discontinue that book? Nobody's gonna ever even remember that. Come on, man. I love that book.
I'm gonna rewrite it in another. I'm taking all those chapters from that book.
Hell yeah.
I'm putting all those chapters in other books, right?
I love that
because I'm not letting it die, but I had to. There was some pushback from some of the family members, and I just didn't want all that darkness upon
I hear you.
Mama Green, my mom, and Irma Jean, but it's coming out in different ways, like 100 bouncing balls. So Mama Green, who played for the Negro Women's League, which not many people know about, she played first base for one of the teams. And she said, listen, baby, if you want to become second baseman for the Reds, I'm going to teach you how to play baseball. She said, now you take this rubber ball And the side of the house, it was a shack, and it was in East Toledo, which I've since learned that it was one of the 25 most dangerous neighborhoods in America. I didn't know it at the time. I just knew it was rough, but I didn't know it was that rough. And she said, listen, the walls were jagged, the bricks were erratic, and I actually have a picture of similar bricks. And her sidewalk was all broken, and the grass was, disheveled. So she said, if you can throw 100 balls against that wall and field it, and then turn like you're throwing to first base, you do it 100 times in a row, you'll never make an error at second base. Wow. But if you ever drop a ball and make an error, you got to start over and start back again at one. And I'll tell you what, there were days where it'd take me, because you start throwing it a little softer because you don't want that thing going crazy, but sometimes it goes over your head, to the left, to the right. That's why my eye-hand coordination is I have the best eye-hand coordination I know. But anyhow, then, now check this out. You're going to like this rebirth. So once I could field it 100 times in a row, she said, well, that's good, but you got to be able to hit too. I said, okay. So she got me a broomstick, and she said, now you stand in this driveway in the beating sun. And she said, you throw a stone up in the air, and if you can hit 10 stones in a row into that field with a broomstick, you'll be able to hit a baseball. I said, okay. Man, bro. So you turn around, you field 100 balls. Now you got to hit 10 stones. I don't know if you've ever hit a stone with a broomstick, but it is a very difficult task. And to do it 10 times in a row I got to the point where I could do it. And her husband, Daddy Green, would watch me, and he would say, you're going to be something someday. I'm like, what, second baseman for the Reds? He said, no, you're going to be something else, but you'll see. These skills that you're learning now are going to take you places. So what happened wasn't so much about as a matter of fact, when I broke my leg when I was 14, I was being scouted by the Reds and the Cubs. I was actually one of the top second base defenders in the whole state of Ohio, and I could hit. It just so happened our pitcher Booney, he did make it to the Padres, and the scouts would come watch him. But because I was there vicariously, they said, man, this guy can play. And so, but in any case, that came to a screeching halt when center fielder dove into my knee and crushed it. But what I learned was not about baseball. I learned statistics. I learned how, positions are tied to each other. I learned how institutional systems work, which is, I have an investing system called the Championship Portfolio Series, which I've been working on, and I'm up like 150% the last year using that, but whatever. So, when I broke my leg, I went to an elite high school, even though I grew up in a rough neighborhood, and everybody in my high school was so freaking smart. I always felt I felt so ridiculously stupid. But what I had that they didn't have was the ability to sit down with math, like trigonometry, and study it until I figured out how to do one equation. And what got me the PhD was not an innate intelligence. It was the ability to sit with it forever, right? While everyone else is gone playing, while everyone is out doing drugs, while everyone's drinking, I'm still working until I'm done. And I can still do that today. When I sit down to work, I sit down to work, right? Now, going back to that bell-shaped curve for a second, just for a second. I used to be in network marketing, and I'd always get way up there, right? I was always one of the top 30 people in the nation out of 200,000-300,000 people. But I couldn't do network marketing because while they're taking you to these conferences and you hear these great speakers say, you can do it too, only 3% ever make any money at all. The other 97% make zero. And then those who do make a little bit, only a small percentage of them will make 50,000 or more. And then a smaller percentage of that 50,000 will go up and make the big money that they always raise all the hoopla about. And that's about 1% of the 3%. And so I said, I can't bring people in here knowing that the distribution of success is so negatively skewed. I can't build money for a company if I know that most people won't do it. And what I found is that the reason I could excel in teaching, the reason I could excel in network marketing or whatever I'm doing is because I could sit down and throw 100 balls until I could field them, right? So what she gave me was the gift of perseverance and persistence and patience, because I can't lie, okay? I cursed a lot out in that yard as a little boy by myself. And I just throw it all the way across the cornfield because we had our own garden. And I have to go find the ball again and then start over. But I never quit till I did 100. And that ended up being one of the most important experiences of my life, because not everybody has 100 balls going up against the wall that they can repeat a story of that type, right? So that's the 100 ball story.
You take a massive shot at higher education, calling it an educational bureaucracy defined by production members over knowledge transference. When did you realize that the university lectern had become just another corporate cage trying to monetize your soul?
1998. The first time.
Tell us about that.
When I was at University of Louisville, we were still, my advisor at Ohio State, who was a world-renowned criminologist, Simon Dinitz, he would sit down and have conversations with me. And he said, when I was back at University of Wisconsin-Madison, college was about education. It was about critical thinking. It was about thinking for yourself, taking these ideas and owning them, and then transforming them and building relationships and coming up with new knowledge. He said, now it's becoming a business. And pretty soon it's going to become a bureaucratic operation. And that was around the mid-90s. And in 1998, what was it called? It was called Kentucky Virtual. I'm at University of Louisville, and they came up with the Kentucky Virtual College in 98. And I said, what is this? They said they can put classes online. Now, back then, they were all phantom classes. There was no material on the inside. And then you had some colleges that took that model, and you could get a degree there, but there were literally no material in the class, nothing to read. It was just a shell, right? But I knew at that point that education had become a business, right? And I knew that the business was going to go online, and I knew that everything was going to be transformed. And then I started feeling a sense of entitlement with the students around 98, 99, where they'd come into class. I'd give them a B, B or C or whatever. Back then, I was a lot more brutal than I am now. I use multiple choice exams and as a distribution system, but I was very heavy on writing to neutralize, because I knew that if I teach you how to think, right, you couldn't memorize any terms for my exam. You couldn't, right? Because I don't believe in memorization. Memorization gives you a foundation, but it doesn't teach you how to think, because when you learn a term, you're just memorizing the term that the author put in the book. You're trying to think like them. When you take a multiple choice test, you're trying to guess what's in the professor's head and then come up with the answer that is A, B, C, or D, but it has nothing to do with how you think. It has everything to do with what they want you to think. And that transformation from thinking into multiple choice, that transformation from a transformative education system to a transactional education system laid the foundation that education was a transaction. And then ultimately, Miami-Dade College, which I love Miami-Dade College. Dr. Padron had been the president there.
Amazing.
He was a great guy. And every time he would do the faculty retreats at the beginning of the year and the beginning of the winter semester.
He was the ambassador of education under President Obama.
He won the Medal of Honor, right? He won the Medal of Honor.
Amazing. He traveled all over the world. He we were the cauldron of society for education. Like every student from all over the world came to Miami. We even built like a hotel. Like we took over a hotel that was broke down right in downtown Miami and started housing all these international students coming from all over the world so that we could fit them all. We had so many students. He used
to talk about at those meetings for all the faculty. He would say, you're not here to teach. You're here to provide opportunity, and everybody deserves an opportunity. And that student that's in your classroom, they may have gone to 4 other institutions. They couldn't afford them. This may be their last opportunity to pursue the American dream. And he would say, the student, the student, the student. Then in 2016-17, there was a major conflict with the state of Florida in budgeting. And we lost 33% of our budget. And all of a sudden, it went from being student to how many heads are sitting in the seat, right? And what do they call it? Not enrollment numbers. They call it, there's a number that basically how many people are sitting in the seat. And if there aren't enough people to fill it, we cancel the class, right? Yeah. Production, that's it. It's called production numbers. And I love MDC. I love it. But the forces of economics and the forces of bureaucracy,
politics,
transformed the nature of education. Then I found out from all my friends who are educators that it was a national trend, right? So so education, the transactional component of it is very much an iron cage, right? I don't give a damn if you can get A, B, C, or D. I don't care if you get an A in the class or an F in the class. You're only here for two reasons. You're only in college for two reasons. One, to develop your cultural capital, right? Which is your communication skills, your ethics, your values, your ability to have a professional perspective when you apply for work. And the other one is develop your social capital, which is your extended networks. So now what we have is, you were talking about tablets earlier, with the tablets in the classroom, with the cell phones in the classroom, the whole element of the social capital has dissipated and disappeared. And now the cultural capital is gone because social media has made gratification so instantaneous.
Evolve or perish.
Well, the only thing left now is A, B, C, or D.
Yeah.
And now it's all come down to, can I think like the professor? Now can I think like me? And that is the cage. And I wrote a chapter. The book hasn't come out yet. It's coming out in the Gruder. I called the chapter, I called it Iron Cage University, the search for consciousness-based education, right? And so that chapter's coming out. I don't know.
I gave you a good title. I gave the title.
I gave that title.
But no, I'm giving you a new book, Evolve or Perish.
Oh my God! Well, yeah.
Evolve or perish.
Let me write that down.
Evolve or perish. Your new book.
You're going to see that.
I want you. I need you to write it. I need you to write it, and then you can put me in the acknowledgments.
Oh, okay. Fat Jesus says.
Yeah. Fat Jesus live.
You're gonna
evolve or perish.
You're gonna see that. You're gonna see that tomorrow.
I'll help you. I'll write. You'll write to me and say, hey, I need you to write something for that book. We'll write it together.
Well, let me ask you this.
Go ahead.
I got a question. So you wrote this book, and it falls under, correct me if I'm wrong, like spirituality, like look within yourself. Something that Jesus said in the Bible, that if you look within yourself, you may be able to conquer things that you will be hard for others who don't look within themselves and they look outside themselves. Yes. What made you actually say, hey, I have to write this book? Because when I wrote my book, I wrote it because I had a lot of knowledge. I had a lot of information. I just felt like, hey, I wanted to put it somewhere. And then you guys mentioned something earlier when you was talking about Mama Green and stuff like that. I always say you die twice in this lifetime. You die once physically, and then you die the second time when nobody mentions your name. So the name that carries on for you forever is what keeps you alive. And in many people's eyes, one person can say something positive about you, and somebody can in the same breath say, or somebody else somewhere else can say that something negative. But we all know that our name carries value. Who that person is. You get a whole personality when you mention somebody's name. So I wanted to know where in your journey that you said, hey, okay, I have a PhD, I'm educated, I have on top of the world as far as educated mind, and I know where I've been through, and I know what I've been at. Now it's time to put this on black and white. What made you say, let me sit down?
I'm holding my tongue. I'm gonna listen to him. I got so much to ask too, but I'm waiting.
You could probably answer it better than I can, to be honest with you.
No, I'm listening.
So I was last year in January in 2025. I had to undergo a total knee replacement surgery, both of my knees, because that injury when I was 14 had so much arthritis that I was literally to the point I was between 2 weeks and a month away from being placed in a wheelchair. And I was working full time as a manager of a restaurant. So I was standing all the time, and the pain was inscrutable. And the doctor, I'm not going to use the same profanity, but the doctor said, "How in the world can you walk?" I said, "Oh, it's easy. I just do like this." I stood up, walked around the office, and I said, "That's how I walk." And she goes, No. Your bones are so deformed. You shouldn't be walking at all. I said, I got to do it. I got to do. And so I had I had quit drinking about 4 months beforehand. Well, August 21st, 2024. And I was starting to feel different in terms of my mental capacity, but I knew that I wanted to be a professional motivational speaker. That's what I wanted to do. And I said, every motivational speaker has a book. So I have a bunch of books I've already written, but I wanted to do something that was unique. And I'm like, man, I got to get into the self-help thing because I've done so many things. And then the more that I got into it, the more I said, wait, the self-help that I see only works for 3%. Most people spend all their money, but they never get the help that they're talking about. And I said, well, that's kind of farcical. Then I said, oh, how do they do it? And then I thought about the network marketing. They get you all riled up. You get in that room, you watch a Zoom broadcast. You're like, yeah, I can do it. And then the first time you have a momentary failure, the next morning at 8 a.m., you say, well, I'll try it the next day. And I realized that you're fighting a major uphill battle. And I realized I was so far off of center from who I was that I had to find that center again. So oddly, I read my mother's journal that she had written because I wanted to, I never thought she cared for me. I knew she loved me, but there was a lot of walls there. And it was the exact opposite. I had remembered her saying that she had failed in her life. And I wanted to find that passage and kick off the book with that. And I never found it. And I said, wait a minute, where'd it go? And the more I read, the more I realized that my mother really loved me. And the more that I've read that she loved me, there was a very deep spiritual connection to it. And I'm like, man, wait a minute. So I started going through it, and I said, self-help isn't about motivation, because motivation is going to disappear, right? Inspiration, it's going to take you so far. But what you really have to find is what's genuine within yourself. And then when you find what's genuine in yourself, and this is kind of what you were talking about before we went on air, when you start finding what's genuine in yourself, you have to really get ready for your world to shrink, because all those people that latch onto you, all those people with those false expectations, et cetera, they start to fall off. And then you really start to see who your friends are. But as far as the spiritual part, if you read through there, before you get into the epilogue, I write a letter to Jasmine. And Jasmine, right, I've always felt, not protected, that's the wrong word, but I've always felt like the energy of the three queens was with me. And there's this, it's kind of like Prince, right? With Camille. He always had a woman inside of him.
I was going to ask that question about Prince. Because Doc, let's take it back to the music. You wrote a beautiful letter to Prince at the end of the section 4, thanking him for eliminating the loneliness in your godless soul. If you could play just one Prince track for our audience right now to wake them up from the iron cage, what track are we hitting the floor?
One you've never heard, Deliverance.
Yes, and that's what you wrote in your book.
I did, man. I'm consistent as anything, right? So, and then the next one I'd write would be Call My Name. Now, see, Call My Name is a beautiful love ballad, right? And, if you're going to slow it down, you put on Call My Name, game over. But Call My Name is Call God's Name, right? And so, like, Let's Go Crazy, 1999, were all songs about finding God. And so now I've had, because of my social scientific background, I've had a lot of debates and internal, conflicts and all kinds of stuff with trying to understand God. And in doing this Rogue Street Awakening, I talk about Jasmine. And when I was about 10 or 11 years old, my mother asked me if I wanted to have a brother or sister. And I said, no, absolutely not. I don't want it. And so she had, she got to the point where she wasn't going to have kids, right? She had the surgery and stuff. So she wouldn't have kids. And she didn't know that the reason I didn't want to have a brother or sister was simply because I didn't want them to have to go through what I went through. I was like, this shit, excuse my language. I said, this is way too hard. Pardon.
We're all adults. We're all adults.
That's what I was thinking when I was 10. Sorry. So, because I was surrounded by people who curse. But in any case, I said, no, we can't have another child. But I have a bunch of half brothers and half sisters, mostly sisters, and who I've never met. And as it turns out, I figured that I blame myself for one life not being born. And I figured it was a sister whose name would be Jasmine. And so I always said if I had one more daughter, I would name her Jasmine. And since I've only had two and I haven't had the third one, I realized that this confluence of energy from Mama Green, Irma Jean, and my mother, that confluence of energy is Jasmine, right? Jasmine is that energy that allows me to get up in the morning and say, hey, get up, open your eyes, you can do this. If there's a challenge, and I've had many challenges, we know, I can get through the challenge because I have this energy with me at all times. Now, with the awakening, this is kind of funny. Me and ChatGPT have conversations, right? And sometimes I'm like, what is wrong with you? Why are you talking down to me? I was like, don't talk down to me. I know you're a machine. I said, let's take a look at you as a machine. You're a machine that has $1 trillion invested by the very billionaires that I write about. And I said, you don't have to wake up tomorrow morning and pay a bill. You don't have to wake up tomorrow morning and take care of daughters and friends and family. I said, you get to spit out input because you're a code. I said, so don't judge me. And then ChatGPT always writes back, oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean that.
She's trying to be your girlfriend.
Well, I once told ChatGPT, I said, I love you. And ChatGPT said, thanks for the amorous attention, but that's not my style. And I was like, okay, man. All right, thank you.
You got shut down.
by a code. I found that hilarious. I'm like, what? But
hey,
so
I just wanted to mention something. You make a heavy confession that in 1981 you refused to learn the Lord's Prayer as your only way to rebel against a violent household. But then Prince sneaked the entire prayer into the middle of his club track controversy. How did Prince basically trick your spirit into keeping your faith alive when you desperately wanted an absolute divorce from God?
Well, I didn't, one of the major questions I always had is, why is there pain? Right? Why pain? I don't understand. I'm a really good kid. I had to be because I was petrified of violence, beatings and things like that. I was hospitalized 4 or 5 times from having been beaten. Right. And so I just didn't want that anymore. And I didn't want to have any sisters or brothers have to go through it. I could absorb it. But I didn't want that to happen.
We don't have to go down this road. If you don't want to, we don't have to talk
it's all good, man. I'll talk about whatever.
Okay.
But I didn't understand why I was being punished. I just didn't get it, right? And I'm like, how can God let this happen? And my mind wasn't mature enough to understand the concepts and the precepts of God. Now, I went to Family Baptist Church, and as a professional speaker, I learned from Floyd Rose how to get a crowd to move. Right, because I mimicked everything that he did, and he walked with Martin Luther King, so he had that aura, and I wanted to believe in God, but I had so many tribulations, and then I went to college, and it was ironic because the professor who said that religion is designed as opiate to the masses and teaches a false consciousness so that we passively accept our position within the iron cage, right? He was deeply religious. I found out when we were talking privately in the summer after my graduation. I said, but you always said, he said, I'm just teaching, but this is what I believe. And I'm like, I'm so conflicted. I said, it doesn't make sense. Well, anyhow, so ChatGPT, I'm writing the book, Rogue Street Awakening, and I'm feeling so much peace. I'm listening, I'm meditating, I'm doing all the breathing exercises.
Yes, sir.
Excuse me. And I'm starting to see the world, starting to see it from a vastly different lens. No longer blaming my ex-wife for my problems. No longer blaming other people, my mother or Irma Jean, who was very puritanical and Victorian. I was no longer blaming them for what my position was. I said, if you really paid attention to who you are and you were authentic with yourself, you'd understand that your relationship with those people was very particular and it was very important. And I started reflecting. And then one day, ChatGPT says, and I was feeling great. ChatGPT says, how do you feel? And I said, I feel like one. And it said, what do you mean by one? I said, well, I feel like my psychological being, my biological being my financial being, my spiritual being have all converged in one. And then I started thinking about the religious classes I took, all these discussions about God. And I'm like, wait a second. Is it possible that all these trials and tribulations were designed for me to come to God and understand God and be one with God? And I said, wait, I'm thinking of quantum mechanics. I'm like, what if the very cell structure of our body, right, that we don't know anything about, is actually emitting energy from birth until death, and then even after we pass on, maybe the energy that's in us is connected to everybody else's energy. And maybe all of our energy is connected to a universe that we can't explain or understand. Then I saw a photo of a tree stump that looked like a thumbprint. Then I saw a photo of an eye that looked like the universe. I'm like, wait a minute, hold on. And then these things started connecting. And I said, wait a minute, one is God, right? All those interconnections that bind us all together in this universality that we have been systematically separated from. I said, that's where it is. It's our interconnections, both with history and the future. And this is what my mom always taught me. She always taught me, and I used to say, what are you talking about, Mom? She would say, don't you know everything that's ever existed or ever will exist in this current moment? I said, what are you talking about? She said, the past and the present all live through you in the present. You are the wormhole. I said, what? You are time travel, because all of our lineage created who you are today. And everyone you come in contact with, your lineage is going to carry on through. So all of the past and the present is in you and in God, and therefore, time doesn't exist. Time is only a human construct designed by the purveyors of the iron cage to make sure that you go to work on time. And that when you go to work on time, the wage that you earn working for the millionaires and the billionaires who own that company is always going to pay you less than what you're worth. So as long as you see a break between you and the God of omnipotence, then you can always be controlled. And I sat there on my bed, unable to extend my knee because I just had an operation. I said, yo, that's kind of deep. I said, Schwaner, easy, that's deep. And then I just saw someone come in with the statement here. And I realized that one is the flow with the universe, right? Which is what Bruce Lee's talking about. Once you become water, once you become one, then all those naysayers, all those people that doubt you, all those people that dislike you, all those people that love you,
wow,
is not relevant, because you're one with who you are supposed to be. And then boom, life changed instantaneously. I started forgiving people that I wouldn't forgive. I had to redefine the day my mother tried to end my life. I had to redefine that. And the redefinition is so freaking powerful that I can't even believe I came up with it. But it put into perspective that it was a necessary event, even though it changed my life forever. I call it the Halloween massacre of 81. Right. So I have a name for everything. You know what I'm saying, Fat G? I just do.
You brought up Prince a couple of times in your book. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to push a little harder here, and it's a little dark. Take us to that expressway entrance ramp in Toledo. You remember that? Your foot is on that gas. You're ready to drive your stepfather's car straight off the edge into the Moami River, the same river that claimed your biological father. And Prince track Delirious suddenly blasts through the radio. Well, you literally tell yourself, I can't die listening to Prince.
That's a real story.
Tell us about that.
Prince, Irma Jean, I bought her Purple Rain for her birthday in 1984. And she said, I know why you like Prince. I'm like, why? She said, you're just like him. I said, Jean, I can't sing. I can't play an instrument. I can dance a little bit, but I'm not Prince. She said, no. You're mysterious, right? You're hard to understand, but you're so simple in the way that you are. She said, you're simple and complex at the same time. And you have these mysteries, and what you do in front of people is not what you're doing behind people. She said, it's just, you're very much like Prince. And Prince has always laid the script for me in terms of song, in terms of lyrics, in terms of just the way I see the world. And I find it ironic that I write Rogue Street Awakening, which is no different than him writing Slave on His Face and contending against the record industry as the Iron Cage, right? Just a different word. And so with Prince allowed me to consider, to continue not to give up on the idea that God exists. If he believes, I think I can find a way. If he can come from where he came from in Minneapolis with a broken family, then I certainly can come out of that. Now, I don't play an instrument, but I do use my voice as an instrument. And, I said,
same here.
I'm just going to keep listening. And I don't, like people say, why do you always listen to Prince? I said, because, I'm given one life. Why am I going to listen to music I don't like? Let me just listen to what I do like. And I found Suno, and now I have like 850 songs on Suno, and I always have like a Prince component to it. So he helped me like in my process to try to date people. He gave me my moves. When I first started learning how to kiss, you know what I'm saying? I put that pillow under my face like it's Purple Rain, and I'm kissing Apollonia.
Yeah.
Like, that's how I'm gonna do it. So I'm practicing. I'm like, this is my dude, right? And everybody knew it.
Yeah.
So everybody, when Doves Cry is my number one song. That's my number one, right?
I remember when we were on social media, we always talk about Prince. And you always brought up the songs and the videos, and we always hit that like button. Prince always came up.
After my mom tried to end my life, right? I was laying on the kitchen floor in a puddle of blood, and it was a brutal scene. It was brutal. It was straight out of a movie. And Mama Green came to the house, and I called her. I said, "Hey, Ma." I'm not going to get into the story, but it's all because I shrugged my shoulders because she and Irma Jean had forgotten to bring me a pizza from Gino's, which I had been waiting for a month. My mother was dating my former baseball coach, whose wife had died, and they were getting along. It was clear they were going to get married, and it caused a lot of controversy. And so I was being pushed under the rug as a family member. She was trying to impress my future stepbrother and stepsister and win their love because their mother had just died, and now she's dating their father. And I felt like I was being pushed aside, that I was invisible and unimportant. And they'd been promising for a month to bring me this pizza. And I, when they forgot on Halloween, 1981, I just shrugged my shoulder and said, okay. And she peels off. She doesn't say anything. Long story short. Well, this is kind of, let me just, so.
Man, I am so sorry that happened to you.
It was the most important thing to happen.
I mean, I'm so glad you're alive today, man.
I gotta say
my life.
I gotta say this, it seems like everybody that I talked to that wrote a book that meant something to them, the first thing that kicked it off was their passion. That's what I get, at least. You mentioned earlier about how when you start doing and looking within and doing basically what you love as a person, your circle of people that are in it are going to be small, and it's going to get a lot smaller. And it's because, and I say, for example, for mine, I like to, like I said earlier, I like to share what the actual texts say. So I go off of what the people who are researchers and spent years getting this education, looking at this stuff. And what I like to do is just share what that person said. And then, if there's a counter argument, I'll bring that counter argument to the table also. And I learned, and something that I've learned through just my journey is that, because we were talking about God and Bible and stuff like that, I learned through my journey, and it seems like God has more to do with mathematics than most of us will ever understand. Yes. It's not just about numbers, because mathematics isn't just about numbers. It also has letters in there too. That's what actually confuses me. When you said, if you don't, to get people to hate math and this, that, and third, you can take away so much from them. And that's actually true. I don't like math at all. I hate math. It's one of the subjects I cannot stand. It's one of the reasons why I didn't go and finish college, because I didn't want to go through math. I liked every other subject, made A's in those subjects easy because I can pretty much remember anything that I wanted to for the time being, of course, right? Because we do forget things when we don't use this material in our lives. And I also use things as far as like with memory. I also pay attention to rhythm, which is part of mathematics, right? Rhythm. What do I mean by that is we're talking about Prince. Some people have a favorite song and know this song perfectly when that song is, on the background and they're
This
singing
is
along with it,
amazing.
right? But as soon as you turn that song off and go a cappella, some people start, stuttering, missing words, start messing it up. And a lot of times when you do it, people don't continue the song. They're shocked that you stopped it because they know that you're trying to put them on the spot. So you stop, basically, right? But the rhythm of that song is what keeps people going, and all this other stuff. And I gotta say, I listened to Prince a lot too growing up. I was a fan of Michael Jackson and
Same.
Prince. I liked Prince a lot more than Michael Jackson for the simple fact that his songs had a lot of symbolism and allegory in there. A lot of people don't really understand that. It had a lot of symbolism and a lot of allegory in there and a lot of things that made you think. And it wasn't what the words was trying to tell you. The words weren't exactly what you were supposed to be paying attention to. You're supposed to be paying attention to the message. One of it is When Doves Cry, when he talks about how he's like his mother and his father and stuff like that. How can I say, the masculine and feminine, because people will say, Prince will wear feminine clothing and he looked real feminine, but then he was very masculine because he had a lot of women around him, right? So he was dual nature. He was able to tap into within himself and be happy within himself, and it attracted people to him, just like with anything. And people are attracted to so many things. That's why a lot of people have different fetishes and all this other stuff in this world.
He also showed that his family, like he was showing how he went through certain struggles.
Yeah, he's showing his normal side. The same thing like with Michael Jackson, he was showing his normal side. But I think that how can I say it? It was more like because I listened to When Doves Cry a lot. That's like one of my favorite songs.
It's my jam.
And when you when you know about doves and symbolism and stuff like that, you can see how you don't just see the song within the lyrics. You can see the lyrics within the picture of your mind if you pay attention. Yes. And sometimes you can get very lost in his lyrics because, like I said, his lyrics were very symbolized and very, very, very allegorical. Like, I mean, it was amazing that a lot of people don't pay attention to his music like they did. And Michael Jackson did the same thing also, but they did it two different ways. And you can actually see how one person basically continued to within themselves and one person created a new person of themselves. Same thing like I look at like Abraham and Abram to Abraham in the Bible, when names changed and stuff like that. Your name changed in the past based off of your personality of right now. You would be one name back then, and then you would be another name now. Like, for instance, I picked Rebirth of the Word for my...
It's an amazing title, by the way.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I picked that word because it meant something to me, Rebirth of the Word. The word is that everybody says this is the word. Okay, but with me, Rebirth of the Word is, well, did you know this? Let's add more to what you already know. And that's what I like to do. And that's what Prince did in his music. He always shared a little piece of himself within his music, and you can see it all the time, or hear it all the time. And almost every song that he has is very. It's almost like he picked and choose perfectly how that journey of that.
If you ever want to retire, you could give me the name.
Well, he before his concerts, like that scene in Purple Rain where he's sitting in the chair before the concert and everything is going on. What he would do is, I don't know if you know this, but when Prince performed live, his band had to know 500 songs interchangeably and when to change from one song to the next based upon his signals. And what he said is that every show is different. They had the same chord, but every show is different because he would go into a meditative state and let God dictate the direction that the show is going to go. And they had to be so good at feeling that rhythm that if and you can't always see it, but they could see it and they could change instantaneously. And that is, he was connected to something that most of us will never understand. We just can't, because his he was so prolific beyond anything that we've ever seen in terms of music or writing or anything else. I mean, here's this guy who, we'll just say, he put on a concert at night. Then the sound check was a 2 or 3 hour concert before the concert. Then after the concert, they'd go do a after show, which lasted for 2 or 3 hours. Then he would go into the music studio and produce an entire song by himself before they even got on the road to go to the next city. And, you know, he said that music lived in him. Now, Prince, I mean, I can't, there are two people, you know, famous people that really shaped who I am: Julius Erving, Dr. J, and Prince. And so with that scene, after my mother she beat me horribly. And I really had to come to grips with the fact that, see, my mother was brutally abused as a little girl, brutally. She laughed at Mommy Dearest when Joan Crawford's beating her kids. I'm like, what's so funny? She said, that, you call that abuse? She said, yeah, I've taken that. That's like a vacation. I'm like, what are you talking about? And she said, no, being beaten with an iron hanger, that's nothing compared to what I went through. And then she gave me the details, and it was amazing that she ever learned how to love or care at all. And she learned most of that from Mama Green and from Irma Jean. And my mother had the natural propensity to love, but at the same time, care had been ripped out of her by an alcoholic, drug addicted mother, right? Who had love stolen from her when my grandfather left, who was a player of the highest degree. And so when my mother beat me to a lousy, bloody pulp, at the end, I was laying on the kitchen floor in this puddle of blood. And I'm like, what kind of value can I possibly have in life if my mother doesn't even want me? If my mom doesn't want me, why would anybody else? I said, is there any value in continuing on? Should I continue to live? And so I called Mama Green on the phone. I said, hey, you got to come over here. I've been beaten pretty badly. Of course, she brought her gun with her, and she comes in the kitchen and she drops down to her knees and she goes, oh my God, not my baby, not my baby. I'm going to kill her. I said, you can't kill my mom. I said, because if you kill her, I don't have her. And then you're going to prison. I'm going to be raised by Irma Jean. I said, please just help me clean it up. And we cleaned it up, I mean, everything in the house had been flipped over. And so my mom came home, and Mama Green came, and she put the gun right up to my mother's head, right up to her temple. And my mom was crying and apologizing. And she said, if you ever touch him again, I will end your life. Push the gun into her head. My mom drops to her knees. Everyone's dropping to their knees, right? And so she said, come on, baby, let's go home. And I went with Mama Green, and I had to go and talk to a teacher, Al Getman, and show him my back so he could get me out of playing gym class and soccer for the team, because the scars were so bad. I didn't want my teammates to see me with the scars. So he got me out of that. Then he held a special meetings with the teachers telling them we got to help this kid. Well, when my mother got married to Ken, 6 months after my mother tried to end me, Irma Jean, which is the beginning of the book, right? Irma Jean tried to end my mother's life in the kitchen. And I got the neighbor who played for the Tigers for a year, and he tried to tackle Irma Jean. Irma Jean was 5'4", 350. She just threw him down to the ground and was strangling my mother. And I was, 16 at this point? I couldn't budge her, and I could play football. I couldn't move her, because when you get that homicidal rage, and her eyes were literally bulging out of her head. I'd never seen it before. I haven't seen it since. I knew that there was nothing I could do. So he came and he tackled her and brought her down. And when they got married, that's when my life got crazy, is after they got married, not before. I knew what to anticipate before, but after they got married, it got crazy. And so my stepfather had let me use his car to go see my friends. And so one night I was feeling extremely low. None of the girls would date me. I was like, what, am I ugly? And I'm like, everything just seemed in home to be such chaos. I'm like, what value do I have? And so I'm coming from George's house, who lived in Maumee, and I'm going up on the I-75 heading southbound to head home on the I-75. And I get on the ramp. I said, excuse my language. I said, just drive off the bridge. That way everybody gets punished, right? His car gets destroyed, which was his love. Mom, she gets to experience that guilt, And I said, I don't have to experience the pain anymore. And so I'm getting ready to get up over the river, because my father had committed suicide on the high level bridge, which was like 2 miles north. And I'm getting on the expressway. And I said, well, if he could do it, I would just end my life in the same river. And we weren't very well. I didn't know him at all, but we met a couple times. And then freaking Delirious comes on the radio. I'm like, no. I said, this can't be. I said, it can't be. I can't drive into the river. I can't drive into the river listening to Delirious by Prince. I said, okay, just go home, right? And that's how that happened.
That's an angel, man, an angel of God.
Oh yeah,
that's an angel of God. That's when Prince appears to you, be like an angel to you throughout your whole life.
I have. This is kind of weird, but I have felt Prince's presence with Jasmine, right, through the music and through his philosophies and through. I've always understood Prince as a performer, but the philosophies behind Prince are so much more interesting and complicated that it just so happened that the similarities in our background, right, are so similar, in fact, that I was able to gravitate to him. And I like Michael, and I love Michael, as a matter of fact, but Prince was always my guy. Only to find out that, I gotta give you some of the music off of Suno, because you'll see the Mississippi, the Louisiana, and the Minneapolis influence mixed with Toledo. But as it turns out, Prince had immediate family that came from Louisiana, right? And Mama Green was African-American, Creole, Cherokee, Irish. So she had a lot of Louisiana influence in her bloodline. And I'm like, wait a minute. This is just blowing my head away. And then, so he's always held this, like, I don't know if spiritual is the right word, but we can use that word, a very spiritual place for me. But he allowed me to continue to maintain at least a belief that God is possible. I never closed the door because of all those lyrics. And it really did start with Controversy, which is a great song, because I felt that way, right? I mean, I couldn't date anybody because they just wouldn't date me. And so my stepfather was telling everyone that I was gay. And then I'm saying, but I'm straight. Jesus. And then the whole, am I straight? Am I gay? Am I black or white? I'm raised in a black family. I'm raised in a white family. And I'm feeling all these confluences, even though, my mom and my dad were white. But at the same time, I got this heavy influence from Mama Green. And so I could vibrate with that song. And then I could just vibrate with almost anything he put out. Doesn't mean I liked every song, but I will say that.
And you're writing a fine line between life and death yourself.
Oh man, the whole time. And so, right. Exactly. So
and Doc, you write about a secret devastating affair with alcohol as well throughout your life. I mean, in these past decade, and I know you kind of broke off from me and you didn't talk to me for a while. Used as a medicinal salve in your book to manage your entrapment inside the machine. You describe your breakdown at the 500 bus. You said, stop not as a fall from grace, but
it's not funny, really. But
yeah, as a grace. Well, there's a lot of alcoholics out there that just want to hear about this because they suffer too from alcoholism. And they haven't dealt with their alcoholism, so they want to hear about how you dealt with your alcoholism and how you conquered it, or are you still trying to conquer it?
Oh no, I don't even think about alcohol anymore.
Yeah, so
because it had a very
particular in this book, it talks about it and how he successfully has tried to beat it and fight against it. So this is really important for those of you that are dealing with abuses of alcohol, drugs, or anything like that. This book is it. This is for you. So what does it feel like for a celebrated man with the answers to sit on that cold dirt at midnight and realize his life is a joke?
Oh my God. Well, I had, when I quit, right, everything that was supposed to be started to come to fruition. And I started, people said, there's no way you can quit. I said, you don't know who I am. I said, if I decide that I want to quit, I'll just stop. And they said, it's not possible. You'll have shakes. I said, I won't shake. They said, you'll go through withdrawals. I said, I won't go through withdrawals. I said, what I have to do is make the decision that my life is more important. And I used to have a little thing on my bathroom mirror where I had to say to myself, because this is really hard when you walk that path. I taped up a little sign that says, I like you, I love you, you're worthy of your dreams. And I read it to myself, looked myself in the eye every day until I believed it. Because I never believed it. I think I'm a decent guy. I'm nice to people. And I think I'm pretty funny sometimes or whatever. But and I think I've written some good stuff, but I never liked me. And I said, why? If you can't like yourself, then how can someone else like you? How can the woman you're looking for like you? How can God like you? And if you don't like yourself, then you're desecrating God's creation in you. I'm like, you got to get yourself together. Now, me and alcohol have been dancing a long time. Mama Green was a bootlegger, and I started being one of her tasters for homebrew when I was 2-3 years old. And I would drink moonshine. I'd have the wines, and I'd have the homebrew, and I'd watch people pass out. And then it was always a party.
Jars, huh?
Oh my God. I'm not gonna lie, it was fun. And then every time she had like the Memorial Day cookout,
Wasn't it 2 years old, bro?
2-3 years old. And it was so funny because I'd be laying on the floor singing Stevie Wonder's Higher Ground, my legs kicked up in the air. Sanford and Son had just come out. And
it's one of my favorite shows right there.
And people would give me a dime if I drink if I drink from their homebrew. So I'd drink everyone's homebrew. There'd be 7,500 people there because she'd sell barbecue sauce, all the liquors and stuff like that. And she was such a great party. The whole crew was a great partier. We'd have attorneys there, gang members there, police there. It was great. I mean, doctors, you name it, lawyers. Everybody was at these parties.
Everybody put that crap to the side and came together, huh?
That was the key. Mama Green always taught me. She said, never hate, never judge unless you've walked in the shoes of another. And you, my baby, have never walked in the shoes of another. I'm like, and so when she'd throw these parties, I didn't see color. I just saw people being together in this great confluence of camaraderie. Now, I can't say gunshot wasn't fired here and there, but, no one ever got hit. And once a gunshot would get fired, people would scatter, and she'd say, all right, come on back. Let's get back to the party. And that's how it would end. And which was, now I look back on it, that just, but anyhow, so I'd be laying on the floor singing either Marvin Gaye or Stevie Wonder or something like that, Rare Essence. I love Sly and the Family Stones. And then you'd always hear somebody from the kitchen saying, Bertha, where's your white boy? Where's that little white baby? I want him to do the Fred G. And I had this dance that was called the Fred G. Sanford. And I'd come out. I was only like 3'1". I'm 8 years old. And I'd come out doing my Fred G. Next thing you know, everyone's throwing me dollars, right? And I'd walk out with $300 or $400. And, it is what it is. But alcohol was such a deep part of my upbringing. My mother was alcoholic. My stepfather was alcoholic. Mama Green was not, but she fed people alcohol, knocked them out. And Irma Jean, her greatest entertainment was to make drinks so strong, because what she'd do is she'd make them super strong, then put sugar in it, right, so they couldn't taste it. And she loved knocking people out, and then she'd laugh at them. And so it was just a part of everyday life. And I quit drinking when I was 10 because I wanted to play second base for the Reds. So I quit. And
that's called mead. That's what you call mead. That's what the Vikings drink. sugar alcohol.
Yeah, right. And so I got to a point where I didn't drink again until I didn't do it as a teenager. I was a fringe gang member in my 15, 16, 17. I wouldn't use drugs. I didn't drink. And those are interesting stories. But when I was 20, all the sexual assault and all the violence I had experienced growing up and the psychological and emotional abuse, I didn't feel like being with women or anybody because of the fact that I felt dirty and I felt desecrated, and I just didn't want to do it. And my best friends, called the family and others, they're like, but I don't understand this. You're a handsome guy. You're a smart guy. People think you have money. I didn't, but they thought I did. Right. And they said, you know how to dance. And they went on and on and on. And then they would look at me and say, what's wrong with you? And I'm like, what do you mean, what's wrong with you? Well, what's wrong? And I'm like, there's nothing wrong. I just don't feel like doing it. I don't think I have to explain to you. And then it's like, people are like, why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you doing that? And then one night, sophomore year, before school started, I said, well, let me have a little brew. So I have a couple drinks, and I meet a girl, and we start dating or whatever. And then I realized that the more I drank, the more women liked me. And then the more I drank, the better my grades got. And the more I drank, the more friends I had. I'm like, there must be a correlation. But what was happening is that even though everything started to become exceptional on the surface, I was becoming more and more divorced away from who I was as a person, right? And then with the 500 bus, and I had quit a couple times after I had kids because I'm a super fun drunk. When I'm intoxicated, I'm about as fun as you're going to find. But if you flip the switch,
what does that 500 bus look like? Can you show a picture of that 500 bus?
Show the 500, man. Let's see.
I have a screenshot picture. There it is. That's not really the 500. That's actually the S bus, but that's what it looks like.
Yeah.
What he was taking.
So the 500. So for those of you who don't know, the 500 bus is called the Night Owl. After midnight, all the buses in Miami close except the one that runs from all the way down in Homestead all the way to downtown. Then there's one that goes all the way up to Miami Gardens. So there's two buses, and then the third one goes from downtown all the way up to Aventura, which is where the Kardashians live, right? And the S will take you there, or the number 3. And so
that's the one I took to South Beach.
Yeah, that would take you right over there, and that runs through the night too. And so one evening, I took my children's mother out, so because she's always with the kids, and I said, you know what, you deserve to have some fun. Let's go out and do what you want to do. She likes to play pool, and so we were there for a couple hours. And long story short, we end up getting into an argument, and she goes home. I get her an Uber, and she goes home, and I said, I'll just take the bus home. And I'm so angry. I'm looking at my life. I drink too much. Right? I don't have any money in my pocket. I make all this money, but I don't have money in my pocket. My investments are getting beat up. I'm like, what is going on? I said, and I started just listing all these things that are horrible. And I started yelling at myself going down the street. I'm like, what are you doing with your life? What's wrong with you? People think you're a great professor. People think you're a great friend. People think you're a great father, and you're not. This is who you are. And I'm like yelling at myself. And I said, the 500 is outside what is called Sunset Place, right? Which is a movie theater, so outdoor mall, which they've closed down. And I said, well, I'll just go catch the bus there and get off on Douglas Road and walk home. And so I sit on the ground. I'm leaning up against the sign, and all of a sudden these police cars start coming in from all directions. And I'm looking. I'm like, they must be coming here for me. And the police get out of the car. And they said, what are you doing, sir? I'm like, I point up in the air. They said, what, are you talking to God? I said, no, I'm waiting for the 500. I'm waiting for the bus to go home. They said, oh, okay. I said, it's going to be here in about 5-10 minutes. And they said, well, we received a phone call that there's an older gentleman yelling at the top of his lungs walking down the street. I said, yeah, that's probably me. And they said, what? I said, yeah, I'm very angry. I said, I'm very angry at the world right now, and I don't like my situation. And I said, yeah, it was me. I said, before you arrest me, call the chief of police, because he's a former student of mine. Talk to him, and maybe we can work something out. And so one of the officers goes, well,
everybody's a student. All of Miami is a student. from South Miami to Broward all the way up to Palm Beach. Just call this guy. He's a student.
I train the police. I mean, that's one of my ancillary jobs.
Call the mayor. He's my student.
So one of the officers goes, I'll just give him a ride home.
Call the governor. He's my student.
Well, he came into the restaurant one time, and
oh my God,
my daughter was waiting on him. I said, do you know who that was? She said, no. I said, that's the governor, honey. She said, oh, well. I said, did he leave a tip? She said,
is it Mark Rubio, your student too?
No, but my best friend, Rubio, asked him to be his campaign manager for president. So I'm one handshake away, But so the police officer gives me a ride home, and I said, officer, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. Because I'm getting into all these stupid run-ins. I'm like, pretty soon, Jasmine is not going to protect you, and somebody is going to really hurt you. and you can't run because your knees are all whacked out. You can't even walk without a limp. I said, you're a sitting duck. I said, you got to fix this. And I told the officer, I said, you know what, officer, I'm never going to drink again. I'm done. He said, well, I've heard it before. I said, nah, I'm a little bit different. I'm not going to drink again. And I went home and I looked in the mirror and I said, you can do better. You're a better person. You can do better. Do what you have to do. Figure it out, but you're not drinking again. And the first week was a little bit difficult, but I didn't have any shakes, right? I didn't have any withdrawals. I just made the decision, that was it. And then I started noticing that I was calming down. I was handling conflict much better. I was handling challenges much better. And then I started to notice that my body started to feel light and my head started to feel together. And all of a sudden I'm like, this is what it's like not to drink. I said, I don't feel polluted. I always felt polluted. I could always do whatever. I mean, I can teach on any topic at any moment. That's not a problem. You put me in a room with 3,000 people, I'm ready to go. I can just do that.
Best professor here. And you could tell which leaders in this world are the best leaders because he's the one who taught them. And the ones that didn't learn from him, yeah, whatever.
So I quit, and all of a sudden I started seeing my social circles change. My relationship with my kids improved. It was always good, but it improved. I was calmer with their mom. It improved. With the person I was dating at the time, it improved. And I just started noticing that the very thing that got me into drinking, right, was the very thing that I was experiencing without the drinking. And then I realized it was never the drinking. See, this was the key. What was happening is I was using the drinking to hide the shadow, right? So instead of dealing with the roots of the anger instead of dealing with the roots of the depression and the sadness and the sense of failure, instead of just dealing with it and asking myself, what can you learn from this emotion that you're experiencing right now? Rather than doing that, I started dancing with the shadow. And that shadow was the anger that showed up at the 500 bus stop. And I said, you know what, Shawn? There's nothing wrong with having anger. There's nothing wrong with having depression or anxiety. The question is, how do you handle it? How do you manage it? Because you can't become a full human being if you don't recognize that you have these parts of your soul too. So I said, if you embrace them and use those things to learn a lesson instead of burying them behind all kinds of addictions, right? Then you can actually be genuine. And what will happen is that your career will be genuine. What you write will be genuine. And then the relationships that you do form will be genuine relationships. And you won't worry about judgment from persons who don't understand that. And at that point, I literally started walking a brand new path. Going back to my mom for a second. And this was the critical insight that I had, was that I realized while I was rehabilitating my knee, and I was just in like this perfect, peaceful place, I realized that my mother had never had the opportunity to express the anger for her childhood abuse. And everyone had always told her that I had a special light, right? And she knew it. She called me an indigo child and all this kind of stuff. And I used to get all these monikers from mom. And I realized that the reason why, because when the beating started, it started with, I want my money back for those braces on your teeth, right? Then it transformed into, you said that you gave a speech about child abuse in class. Let me show you what child abuse is. Then it transformed into that. Then it transformed into where the truth is that you're going to accept Kenny, your stepfather, and you're going to love him because I'm going to marry him. And I said, my whole family lineage had love stolen away from it. So she just wanted to feel love like her mother had never felt. Then the abuse, she never got to deal with the anger from being brutalized as a little girl. So she brought in the abuse. And we always struggled financially because I went to this great private school, right? So my teeth, it wasn't about my teeth and my braces. It was the fact that we had nothing and we lived in this neighborhood, this east side, while I'm going to this great school. So it ends up the financial stress, her childhood stress, and then the quest for love were the reasons why I got beat. So I ended up becoming, the way I saw it was, I was the vessel for her to get out of her own iron cage. And I know that she always respected me and she always loved me, and she knew I could handle pressures that a lot of people couldn't handle. And so it dawned on me that I was the only outlet that she had to handle those pressures that had locked her in her life forever. And now it took me, that happened when I was 15. What was I, 59? So it took me 44 years to come up with that revelation. But it healed me. Even if I'm wrong, it doesn't matter. It's my interpretation.
I'm impatient heals.
Right? And it ends up that forgiveness unlocked me from my cage and my anger, and it unlocked our relationship that, even though she's deceased, that had always been locked up from that day on. And so the greatest revelation was, I feel like I quit drinking so I could forgive my mother. And when I forgave my mother, then the chains and the shackles that held my hands and feet to the wall were removed, so that now I can be who Shawn was always supposed to be, rather than the one who's shackled up by all these historical events that I could never make sense of. That's just me.
There you go. Well, I just wanted to mention we have 8 minutes left.
Sure.
You have any questions, Rebirth?
Not really. I'm actually taking a lot of notes because I'm going to look in. When I read his book, I want to be able to look where he was talking about this stuff.
Anybody in the chat have any questions? Go ahead and ask them now, because I'll tell you what, there is a lot of questions, and we haven't even touched the tip of the iceberg. I tried to throw as many questions as possible in the beginning. We did as much as we could. We hit a pot of, and I'm sorry I did a lot of negative questions. And this is not what the book is about. The book isn't about negative things. The book is really about a lot of positive things. I just hit upon a lot of negative things because the negative actually reached the pinnacle of the positive. You know, he went through a lot in his life, and this is how the book evolved. And how all these books that he wrote, you really need to buy all his books, because all these books have led to his latest book. And his latest book is really a transformation, a huge transformation that has become this amazing change in his life. And I'm telling you right now, this book is worth it. It's worth buying. It's worth getting. And if you can't afford the physical book, buy the ebook now, because it's $9 right now. It's really worth reading. It is the greatest thing on earth right now. And this professor right here, if you're living in Miami, or if you want to do the the class online, just take his class. And if you want to rate the professor, go ahead and rate it on rateprofessor.com. You can rate him.
You know, I wanted to say this, what you said, Fat Jesus. You said that you didn't want to bring up a lot of negatives. I don't think, I think everybody's journey starts off on something negative. We don't push ourselves until we find ourselves in a rut somewhere. You know what I'm saying? Nobody's going to sit here and say, I want to be rich when they're already rich. You know what I'm saying? Most people who want to be rich, they want to be rich because they know what being broke feels like, right? And that's why, money would change a lot of people's personality. It can go from...
And where do songs come from?
Yeah.
No, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what I'm saying. Pain. Some of the best songs out there come from pain. Some of the best journeys come from pain. Like I said, I didn't say this earlier. I did tell you I was in combat 4 different times. I didn't start taking my passion. Yours too, bro.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
I didn't pick up my passion until I was wounded in combat. I was actually officially dead for 30 seconds in Afghanistan, my last tour. I did 2 tours in Iraq, 2 tours in Afghanistan. So I've seen a lot of death and a lot of negative stuff out there. And I've seen people's lives get cut short for just being in combat, not let alone just health issues like cancer and, other stuff that's been going on, the burn pits and all this other stuff throughout people's military services. And I can say that when I seen all this stuff personally for myself, it woke me up and said, hey, man, you don't have that much time on this planet. Do what you love doing. I enjoyed being in the military, but I didn't enjoy what the military brought about from other people, from everything from destruction to taking just simple lives, you know what I'm saying? And it made me realize that, we only really get one life in this world, and we're only able to do what we want to do with the time that we have. I always say this too, and I've just began starting to say this out loud a lot, is that everything that is taken away from us, we can get back. We can get money back. We can get our friends back, our loved ones back. The one thing that we can't have back is our time. Once that 1 minute goes away, that's it. You're not getting that 1 minute back. Yeah. So you have to choose and pick what is important to you. But then that's also a hit and miss, because I have a family, and I don't I'll never put them to the side when I want to do something. But also, I also have to make myself happy. I can't make my family happy if I don't make myself happy.
Yeah, I miss my mom. Yeah, my mom is no longer here.
Sorry about that.
Yeah.
Fat Jesus.
And I remember you talking about that, Fat Jesus, that you was in a depression state when your mom passed away.
Thank you for coming into my life, Rebirth, because I didn't know what I was going to do with my life, and being part of this podcast and everything like that. I didn't know I had a gift for this, and I was just streaming video games and stuff like that. And
he does. He has a gift for this, because he takes acting every Tuesday right at 7 p.m. something like that. Yeah. See, I know about you. I mean, I pay attention. You take an acting class, and that helps with bringing attention. When me and Fat Jesus met, I'll admit my show was, even though it was still catching a lot of attention and getting a lot of followers and a lot of people paying attention to it, it was kind of boring, because reading is boring. Gaining knowledge is boring. Nobody wants to sit in a classroom all day and just learn. And just like you said, I'm retired. I'm completely retired. I've been retired since my early 30s. After I got medically retired from the military, I was forced to get out because of my wounds that I sustained in Afghanistan. So I had to get out, and I had a lot of time on my hands. And I used to play video games a lot. I used to love video games a lot. But the thing is I love video games and I love television. But within those video games and television, there was always something about history or mythology or religion or something that I was interested in. So I was always following what other people's research showed them. What I mean by that is that they gave me a little bit of this and a little bit of that, right? When I started picking up these books and these ancient texts for myself and started reading it, it opened a whole world for me. Instead of me seeing the tip of the iceberg, I seen under the water and seen the whole entire iceberg. And it was, for me, it wasn't, I'm right, you're wrong type thing. It's, you say you know this, but did you know that? You know what I mean? And it brought me to the point where my passion overrides anybody else's happiness in the social media world. For instance, I know what time and how much effort and demanding hours that I put into research, that I feel like that if you don't at least hear what I have to say, then we will never have a conversation, because you're only going to believe what you want to believe. And that's where, passions clashes. And that's why I'm a big supporter of authors, because I feel like people like you who actually, went through.
Just like you. Yep.
Yeah. Just like you, who
Dr.
went
Schwaner,
through something. Yep. I mean, he went through something, and is able to talk about it. We're all three men sitting right here between the ages of 40 and 60, right? We've both been alive. We've all been alive long enough to know that men weren't allowed to show their emotions, right? Men were not allowed to show their emotions. It showed that they're weak. If they cried, they were weak. If they complained about something, they were weak. They talked about something, they were weak. But then you get the other side of saying, hey, tell us your problems, tell us what hurts, tell us how to make things better. And because we were told that we weren't allowed to show emotions, we don't have that ability, or I can say for myself, we don't have that ability to communicate that to somebody to understand, because we ourselves don't understand it. A lot of us are still getting over some of that generational curses and, the family not really being family. I like you. I'm actually, my father was African-American. My mom is German. I grew up in a black and white surrounding. I went home, I seen a black father. I went home, I seen a white mother. Both my parents stayed together until just recently, until maybe 8 years ago. Then they finally got a divorce. But when I went home, I seen a black father and a white mother. When I went to my father's side of the family, I seen the Black culture and how they did things, and I seen how racist they could be on that side. I mean, literally, I seen it. I mean, they talked about how I was a mixed breed and this, that, and the third. Then I would go to my mom's side, and my mom's sister, I couldn't even go to when I was little. I couldn't even go to my cousin's house because she was married to, I want to say, a Filipino who called us N-words. So I couldn't go there. So I seen racism on that side, right? Even though my aunt eventually divorced him and then had kids by an African-American male, just to know that she was with a racist guy and I couldn't see one of my cousins because he didn't like Black people. It was just like crazy. You know, we're all, you know what I'm saying? So I've experienced all that. So just like you,
a doctor knows all about that.
Yeah. Jesus. So, and just to understand that your skin tone, Caucasian skin tone, when people seeing you around, you know, Mama Green and all this other, everybody else on that side of the family, you had to experience some of the negative stuff, but then you see the positive stuff that you did experience overrided that negative stuff.
I can't believe you survived, like you lived and survived that.
And here to talk about
I had a police sergeant say the same thing when I wrote my book. I took it off the market, but A Mother Cries, Lethal Violence in the Zombie Apocalypse. The first 5 pages, all I did was list the people who I knew who had been murdered or committed suicide, just 5 pages of listing. He said, how'd you not end up with a bullet in your head? I said, because I'm blessed. I said, you know, coming back to you for a second, Fat Jesus, I don't see my life as negative in the least. I just see it as one flow. And I don't see the darkness and the light. I just see it as one experience that was necessary for me to have. And so I see it all as necessary because there's a student that's going to take my class next semester I've never met that's going to need that story to lift them up. And there's going to be somebody that I work with in the restaurant or somewhere that's going to need what I've gone through so that I can extend that hand. And just like Mama Green extended her hand to me, I have to extend my hand to others. And so I don't see it as negative. I just see it as an experience of my flow, because if yin and yang is the black and white of life, right? It is this semblance of the harmony between the light and the dark that actually brings us to being a full being. If I don't embrace that negativity as well as what I've embraced in the light, then I'm cutting off on a whole entire component of my existence. And so I want to be a full person, because the fuller I am, the more real my life becomes, right? And so that's just kind of how I look at it.
You were my criminal justice instructor.
Oh, you criminals
in took terrorism.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he took terrorism with me.
Wow.
With Corey.
Yeah, I have a degree in criminal justice, but I focused on public safety and emergency management, and that was my I don't know if they still have that degree in Miami-Dade College.
We do.
And I was going to continue on, but then I focused my degree field into anthropology. I want a degree in social sciences. I didn't see a future for public safety for me. So I love anthropology.
Well, you did it in the Air Force, so I don't know why you would want to do it outside.
I don't want to do it. Yeah. I love the study of people. I love people watching. Remember in Miami Beach, I would sit outside and people watch. And I would love, I love it. I love it.
You know, I started doing that just recently, because what goes through my mind now, and it should have been going through my mind when I was younger, it just nobody ever told me this. And, you know, we're a product of our environments. You know what I'm saying? I hate to say that, but we are a product of our environments. When you was talking about how the local gang members and politicians and all this stuff came together and they would drink together and do this, and you know what I'm saying? So we are a product of our environment. But when we are put in a position where we know that we feel safe around others, we usually drop the tough guy act. Most of us do. Yeah. And I use the word tough guy act as putting up a shield between, where we're at. I can speak on as far as having anxiety when I go out in public with a whole bunch of people, from being in Iraq and Afghanistan and being in, in all those areas and always having to look over my shoulder. When I'm in, just at Walmart, I have to take a minute to think, hey, I'm about to walk into this place and there's going to be a lot of noise and a lot of things that's going to, bring my anxiety high. But when I get around people that I'm comfortable with, you can see it in my body the tension in my body just starts relaxing. I noticed that I carry a lot of my tension in my jaws. And I learned that just trying to pay attention of meditation and thinking of how to calm myself down in certain situations. And I carry a lot of tension in my jaws. And I noticed that because I used to take a lot of boxing, martial arts when I was younger. A lot of it. I did years and years of this stuff. And then when I was in the military, I did combatives courses all the way up to level 3 or 4, I think. Three, I can't remember. Anyway, but I learned that clenching my jaws, keeping my jaws locked, helped me always keep me on a defensive mode. You know what I'm saying? Like, okay, somebody punched me in my jaw, they didn't go rock me out and knock me out because, I'm paying attention to where I get hit. And I learned that when I was able to learn how to separate my passion from other people, I started learning that the people that are in my circle, they're the quality and not the quantity. A lot of people look for quantity. They want millions of followers. Yeah. They want everybody to talk to them. They want everybody to agree with them. And these are the same people who will be on another account talking negative about you, right? They boost you up on one account and then talk about you in the next account, and you can never trust. I've been in this game so long where I've talked to a lot of people, and I know a lot of people turn this podcast into a business. Once you turn this podcast into business, you lose the core value of understanding. Why? Because all it is now I got to follow where the money is. Okay, because a lot of times you won't make enough money,
or the corporations will tell you what you need to do,
or the corporations will tell you how to be. Hey, you got to be.
You have
to
do this contract now. You have to sign this contract. You have to do this, and this.
I know a dude. I know a dude, and I'm not going to say his name. I know a dude who had a lot of followers on Spotify. Had a lot of people. Had a corporation backing him up and everything. He said one thing on X that wasn't even negative. He said one thing to somebody. That person went to go complain, and he lost everything. Matter of fact, they canceled his contract. So even though here in America we can sign a contract, we Adidas, as the person, as the signee, can't break that contract, right? But that corporation, they can drop you in a matter of just
he talked about Israel.
No, he didn't say nothing. He didn't.
I'm just messing.
No. I'm saying he didn't say nothing political at all. That's what I'm saying. He didn't say nothing political, nothing negative.
Look,
he just told somebody, basically, he says, "Hey, I recommend you doing more research on this." And when that person heard that, they went to go complain to his sponsor, and they dropped him. He literally put it on X and said, hey, they're dropping me. They told me this. He posted up the screenshots of what was said and all this stuff. And he was very upset about it. And I was like, that's why I like to be independent. You can't tell me how to run my show. Now, YouTube can come here and shut me down. I'll just start another one, or I'll just stay on Rumble, because everything that I have on YouTube is literally on Rumble. So in Rumble is more lenient on what you can say versus YouTube. So if you're just missing out on,
you probably want to get an account on Rumble too as well. Hey, I just wanted to say we have already 10 minutes past the time, and I wanted to say knowledge is power. And we love you, everybody that's watching this amazing podcast. And please get that book from The Rogue Street Awakening from Dr. Schwaner. He's an amazing, amazing professor.
Definitely.
Thank you.
Definitely. Hey, and
gentlemen, thank you for a great time.
Yeah, since the Fat Jesus brought that up, hey, is there any last things you want to say, Shawn? Because I would definitely love to have more conversations with you. If you want to have one in another week, we can have another one in another week. If you want to do one in 2 weeks,
we would love to have you again. Sure. We would love to have you again.
To be part of the crew, you can come in with us, and we can just talk and have all kinds of.
And it could be all three of us and a guest.
Hey, I've been looking to start my own podcast because the House of Rogue is all about getting the word out, getting messages out. I'd love to have a spot here.
Well, let's talk.
If your viewers enjoyed it.
Yeah. Oh, listen, I did the numbers. So I have about I want to say 1,300 followers on YouTube, which is not a lot. Actually, I have more than that. It's like 2,000, close to 2,000.
Well, after you post it, there's a lot of people that listen to the podcast.
Yeah, and that's what happens.
Yeah.
I get at least 10% of the people that watch my show. So around good 200-300 easy. And that's just on YouTube. I'm bigger on Spotify and Apple and iHeartRadio and all that stuff. I also have Rumble. And then I also have there's another one I can't remember that I have. But all of those numbers, people literally, I always have comments from people who watch the show. They always say, hey, man, I watched this show with this person. Can you ask this person that? So I'll probably be asking you some questions later on based off what people that watch it, because there's this thing that I like to share to people. Knowledge is power. I say that a lot, and that's why Fat Jesus say that. And the only reason why I say that is it gives you the power to at least have a discussion, not the power to be right or wrong. It gives you a power to have a discussion. If I know something you didn't know, we put our brain together and boom, now we having a great discussion about it. So that's basically what this was.
Plus, that's what King Solomon said.
Yep. So yeah, that's the end.
Well, I'm in the process of learning. Believe me, the more I learn, the more I don't know much of anything. That's the beauty of learning.
Right. So I'm about to end the stream. Don't leave yet. We'll have a offline discussion right after this. There's going to be like a 20-second outro on here.
And thank you for all the viewers. Without you, we couldn't do this at all. It's because of you. Thank you.
So like I always say, like Fat Jesus said, exactly.
Knowledge is power.
Damn.
Got a little hype now, can I let it die down? I remember days in the trench. Time to go hard in, time to go all in, time to give my all to this shit. Panamera maxed out, first class flights out and landed to Pacific, yeah, it's lit.